blue. Oh, but I'm caught up in a whirlwind and my ever-changing moods, yeah.
The Style Council were a British band who were formed in 1982 by Paul Weller of The Jam and Mick Talbot of Dexys Midnight Runners. They added Steve White on drums and DC Lee on vocals, who was Weller's girlfriend at the time. And they released 4 albums before they ran out of steam in 1989. They had a brief reunion in 2019. Hi, my name's Dan. So this was the first album by the Style Council and my first listen to it. And mostly it's kind of what I expected. I am aware of the Style Council. I was aware of them when they were formed and when they were actually a thing around. I know some of their singles. There's one of their singles on this album which I vaguely know. I know some of their other tracks a bit better than that. I would describe this as being mostly a blend of jazzy pop with a blue-eyed soul feels to it. That jazzness to it was something that was an up-and-coming thing in the 80s, and it varies from quite pop to actually quite jazz at the other end. So when people talk about 80s jazz pop, they might think of Alison Moyet, for example, who did quite a bit of that. But there's several other people who definitely brought jazz into the mainstream pop world, or certainly elements of it. However, there's a strange musical diversity on this album. So I'm not going to describe all the tracks, but I'm going to describe a few. The first track is a piano solo, which sounds a bit like Jules Holland boogie woogie piano kind of style stuff. The next track is a solo guitar and singing, but it's using extended jazz chords. It sounds like a jazzy Billy Bragg in some ways. There's what I presume is the last track on side 1 of when it was a vinyl album, almost straight jazz of the track Dropping Bombs on the White House. Slightly interested by the title with that. I don't think they're talking about the American White House because they've written it as one word, and I think this is a reference to a certain person who had the surname Whitehouse. There's also the rap of A Gospel, 1984. Even so, still very early days of rap making it through into anything that was not based in New York. Electro funk of Strength of Your Nature, again, kind of it nods to the hip hop world there, and those 2 tracks certainly feel they stick out amongst the other tracks as being very different stylistically. The singing's mostly Paul Weller. There's some guest female vocals. At times, I felt that I was wondering who he reminded me of with his voice on this album, and I eventually decided it must be Marty Pellow of Wet, 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 who was a contemporary at the time. So at that point in time, when the Style Council were around, I had my own musical taste, which obviously I still do, and I was quite negative about the Style Council generally. Mind you, I had actually been negative about the Jam before that, and in retrospect now, I quite like the Jam. And so, do I like it now? Yeah, actually reasonably well. There's no standout songs. It is an interesting feel. I think that they were somewhat laying down the path for the jazz involvement in pop here, so that's interesting. But it does feel like it's struggling for an identity and for direction. It's diverse, and the diversity doesn't even flow in a way that makes sense to me as an album. It feels like, yeah, bits and pieces put together, and it feels like they had too many ideas and just didn't really know what to do. So it's not as rounded as an album as it could be. It's a reasonable listen, nonetheless, for that, and I quite enjoyed it. So what do you think? Do you like this album? Do you hate this album? Do you really not care about this album? Whatever you think, please do let me know by leaving a comment. And that's it from me for now.
Handed down from fathers to sons was a hatred of weakness and a love of guns.